UN eminent committee of experts in Mecca investigates Houthi violations and weapon smuggling. Internally local displaced people in Yemen suffering continues amid war. Hodeidah port where 70% of humanitarian aid decks while Yemenis starve. Is it a blessing or a curse? Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news with me, Rushain Fouad. The start is from El Dola. The government forces killed and injured number of Houthi militia elements northwest of El Dola. A military source said that those Houthi militants were killed in a bombing that targeted their movements in El Faykhir area west of Qa'taba district. Confrontations between the two sides have flared again after weeks of complete calm on various fronts on the province. The continuing war in Yemen has complicated the crisis of displacement in the country. 20 million people require humanitarian assistance. More than 4 million Yemeni people are displaced, and many others need food due to the deplorable economic situation. The following report has more details on this story.
For nearly 3 years, thousands of displaced families in Al-Dhala have been experiencing the bitterness and pain of displacement. In this residential city in Sinah area of Al-Dhala, hundreds of families suffer from the deteriorating economic conditions and the lack of income for many of these families. The lack of necessary services such as water, electricity, sewage, health, education and other has increased their suffering. Not to mention their suffering due to the rain falling into their homes, due to the lack of windows and the harsh and cold winter for the same reason. In addition to the lack of furniture and household utensils.
Because of the war and violence that took place in Al Aoud and other surrounding areas, we moved here. In this housing unit, more than 260 families suffer from health and diseases. Malaria and dengue are spread due to sewage. Another problem is the lack of food, as some families do not have anything to eat because organizations' aid does not reach this camp.
The suffering of displaced children in the residential city of Sinah goes further as there is no place to receive education. However, number of teachers volunteered to teach in the bare land, a school that does not have classrooms, tents or seats and lacks the most basic utilities, amid appeals to the authorities and humanitarian organizations to help these children to complete their education.
A year has passed and the children did not receive any education and did not enroll in school. So we made a personal effort to establish a school for children, where they would sit on the ground and sky as a roof for the classes. No camps, no books, no bags, and without the personal initiative from some teachers who volunteered to help, children wouldn't have any education. We are now calling on international organizations and urging them to quickly help these children.
Due to overcrowding of the displays in the house unit, we had to educate the children without classrooms, and we tried to make an effort to provide them with knowledge. And thus we asked the organization to respond to our appeal and help the displaced in this unit.
The suffering of the displaced families in the residential city of Sinah is aggravated, and war, the high cost of living, the lack of income, and the absence of necessary services have besieged them for 3 years. The hardship of the displaced people in Dhala is increasing due to the absurd war waged by the Houthi militias and the absence of necessary services that cause disease to spread, as the displaced families in the Sinah were forced to teach their children in a school that does not contain either classes, chairs, or even tents.
Confrontations resumed between government forces and the Houthi militia in Ma'rib. Field military sources reported that government forces took confrontations against the Houthi militia in the Mas front, northwest of the city. Renewed fierce confrontations between the two sides inflicted heavy losses on Houthi militia. The UN Security Council Sanctions Committee held a meeting with the local authority in Mecca to discuss a number of issues, most notably weapon smuggling to the Houthis. The local authority in Mecca briefed the committee of the humanitarian situation and stressed the urgent needs of the population and the displaced. The meeting addressed also the issue of Houthi minefields as well as the mass destruction of the infrastructure. The coordinator of the committee of experts said in a brief statement that the purpose of the visit was to investigate humanitarian issues and violations of human rights. She stressed that the team is looking for cases of weapon smuggling that go to the Houthi militia.
Many issues were discussed and many inquiries were addressed to the local authority. It was a wonderful meeting. A full picture of the humanitarian situation was developed. Also, discussion of mines, destroyed schools and many other humanitarian issues were addressed.
In Hodeidah, more than 200 eye surgeries were conducted by the free medical camp that was held in Hais Rural Hospital by the Ghita al-Rahma Foundation supported by Kuwait. The medical camp targeted poor vulnerable families and displaced people who cannot afford treatment costs. Needed medical tests and screening of patients was carried out of free charge. This comes as a gesture to alleviate the suffering of those vulnerable who have been crushed by the ongoing war. Hodeidah port is one of the most strategic ports on the Red Sea. 70% of humanitarian aid stacks on its shore. Yet people of the city starve to death because Houthis steal these aids and give it to their own people. More details on the geopolitical importance of Hodeidah port is within this story.
The port city of Hodeidah is very important indeed. It is the sole gate from which all necessary supplies are channeled or even tunneled into Yemen. Talking about the basic needs the port ushers, the most basic and humanitarian needs that come to Yemen. It also provides Houthis their military or other supply that they need in order to keep the bloodshedding in Yemen continues with a vicious circle. Hodeidah port is considered by experts to be a hidden window for smuggling Iranian weapons to Houthis. It is considered too that the port could be launching pad for Houthi rockets and drones that are being fired from and neighboring Saudi Arabia. Experts say that Hodeidah port is also believed to be used by Houthis to train militia. It is used as a station from which the boats are run into the Red Sea, loaded with explosives or with mines. These boats are steered in suicidal attacks to disrupt navigation or to gain tactical privileges for Houthis. Houthis' control on Hodeidah is a real test to the international community as a whole, not because of their humanitarian obligation towards the Yemeni people, but because of their military and political obligation as well. Controlling the port city means the humanitarian assistance to more than 20 million Yemenis are at stake. Houthis are in control over what is being accessed and what is being stockpiled for their own loyals and tactical benefits. The humanitarian aids that have to be delivered to those children who are agonized with the host of calamities are siphoned through underground channels, according to experts. Those displaced and disabled are also suffering. The entire Yemen is in fact suffering because of the mixed blessing of Hodeidah. As to the international political responsibility for Hodeidah port, the question arises: what if indeed it is the Iran-backed Houthi allow more Iranian interference in the Red Sea zone? Surely it will not be interference in the Red Sea only. It will be deep penetration in the Gulf states, a threat to Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and will be a stumbling block to the global marine transport. The humanitarian, military, political and economic consequences of Houthi control on Hodeidah port have severe international costs. Eventually, while innocent citizens of Hodeidah are envied because they have the port in which 70% of humanitarian aid decks, yet they are starving and have no slice of bread to eat. This is irony of fate in its best manifestations.
Iran-backed Houthi militia robbed a development institution in Ib in continuation of their organized operations to seize and loot private institutions and property. Local sources said that the militia broke into Ra'idat Foundation and confiscated all its contents. The sources added that the looting came weeks after the militia expelled employees and workers and prevented them from entering the institution. This is not the first civil institution to be seized by the rebels. Al-Khansa, Dar al-Khitab, and Al-Sunnah associations were also a subject of robbery. All such criminal acts are reported to have been carried out by a Houthi eminent leader called Ahmad al-Asri. Coming next. Houthis continue aggression against childhood in Yemen.
على منطقة الروضة استهدف الأطفال الأبرياء اللي يلعبوا في الشارع يدعي للسلام يقولوا للسلام يقتل أطفالنا يقتل أطفالنا الأبرياء.
أنا قلت افتجعت ولا قلنا يقع واحد صاروخ ثاني طلعت البيت حقنا قاعد أنا ألعب أنا وأصحابي والصاروخ انطرح.
Welcome back. Since Houthi rebels seized the capital Sana'a in 2015, human rights violations have been committed on a daily basis. This has received local, regional, and international condemnation. These violations have reached their climax with targeting children. This report has more on Houthi militia violations against children.
The war in Yemen has overshadowed all aspects of life. Children, however, are the most vulnerable. The war obligated children to experience things they would have never thought about. They experience fear, panic, and blood. The truth about being a child in Yemen is that you could be killed, injured, dropped out of school, brainwashed, and forced to battlefields in which you do not know how to kill and why. Yemeni children are even used by Houthi rebels as human shields in the war front. Human rights-related reports accounted that 640 children were killed after being recruited by the Houthi militia in the past half of the year. During the same period, according to reports, 333 children were killed and about 3,400 injuries were documented. Right now, 93% of children in Yemen are suffering and need assistance due to the violence that continues to devastate the country. The war in the country has
The National Committee Against Coronavirus announced the registration of 51 new cases of the epidemic in 5 governorates. Committee officials said on Twitter that 34 cases were recorded in Hadramaut, 5 in Aden, 7 in Ma'rib, 4 in Taiz, and 1 in Al-Dala. Also, 6 deaths were documented, 4 in Hadramaut, 1 in Taiz, and 1 in Socotra, plus 34 recovered cases, 17 in Aden, 10 in Hadramaut, 4 in Ma'rib, and 3 in Taiz. With the current updates, the total confirmed cases are 7,676, including 1,444 deaths and 4,736 cases of recovery. Amid the outbreak of COVID-19 cases in the country, Ministry of Health has raised alert and confirmed that people need to stick to preventive measures as to be prepared to combat the third wave of the pandemic. The following report has more details on this story.
COVID-19 pandemic third wave has begun in Yemen, according to the announcement made by the Ministry of Health, which directed to raise the standby status of isolation centers with registrations of infected cases in the areas under the control of the legitimate government, while the Houthi militia continues to hide the number of infected and deaths despite the hospitals being filled and cemeteries receiving victims daily. The Minister of Health and Population, Dr. Qasim Buhaybih, mentioned that the third wave of the COVID-19 has started, as he called on citizens to adhere to the precautionary measures against the epidemic. He also confirmed that the number of infections announced in the areas under the control of the legitimate government does not exceed 10% of the actual numbers of daily infections. Buhaybih stressed that the past few days witnessed a remarkable increase in the number of cases of infection with the virus, and that the ministry directed all isolation centers in the governorate to raise their alert to the maximum capacity. In light of the total rise of COVID-19 confirmed cases, they represent only 10% of the cases in society. We do not monitor all cases of COVID infections, but only cases with severe symptoms which undergo isolation centers or laboratories. Yet, infected people could be greater than the officially announced ones. People and institutions are required to stick to the preventive measures approved by the Supreme Committee for Emergencies, and they need to take vaccines against the corona epidemic, Buhaybih added. COVID-19 outbreaks for the third time in a country where international organizations warn that 20 million of its 30 million population are without medical care. Health facilities have been destroyed, humanitarian supplies are short, and all due to the current war.
Economic experts are calling for the need to establish a real partnership between the government and the private sector. Participants in a symposium entitled Outcomes of the Economic Crisis in Yemen, Problems and Solutions stressed the importance of coordinating financial and monetary policies and fostering supervision to prevent currency manipulation. Experts called on the parties to neutralize the national economy from the conflict and secure the obstacles and illegal realities imposed on basic commodities. The Central Bank of Yemen in Aden announced the arrival of $665 million to its account that was transferred by the International Monetary Fund. The bank made a statement that the transfer was made in accordance with the vote of the International Monetary Fund Board. The draft decision requires distribution of special withdrawals, which is around $650 billion. The bank indicated that the amount will contribute to strengthening the external reserves of foreign exchange. This will support the national economy and achieve stability and exchange rate. Here is a reminder of the main headlines. UN Eminent Committee of Experts in Mecca investigates Houthi violations and weapons smuggling. Internally local displaced people in Yemen suffering continues amid war. Hodeidah port where 70% of humanitarian aid stacks while Yemenis starve. Is it a blessing or a curse? This is the end of the news. Thank you for watching.